Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of Sustainable Saturday. Sustainable Saturdays are a series of sessions where we speak about a variety of different environment and social related topics for your knowledge. I am Sandra Ferreira, and today I will be speaking about ecotourism. Come for the scenery, stay for the culture. नाउ टूरिज्म एक ऐसी चीज है जो हम सबको अच्छी लगती है ना। ट्रिप्स वगैरह जाने, एक साल में एक बार तो ट्रिप जाने का सबका एजेंडा रहता ही है, वेदर इट माइट बी अ बिग ट्रिप रियली फार और इट माइट बी अ स्मॉल ट्रिप, बट ट्रिप तो जाना है। टूरिज्म इज अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट ऑफ आवर लाइफ, but I am unsure if many of us know the whole idea of ecotourism. Like, of course, we do know that tourist, just say, you go to some place and then you are not supposed to, dirty that place and all of that stuff. But did you know that there is a whole branch of tourism that is called as ecotourism? Let's dive into this topic and understand a little basics about, what ecotourism is. So, let's start with a question that I have already imposed to you. What is ecotourism and is it the same as sustainable tourism? Another topic that I have just thrown at you. So, let's look at it. इकोटूरिज्म इज बेसिकली एक ऐसा टूरिज्म जिसे रिस्पॉन्सिबल, जिम्मेदारी से उठाने वाले टूरिज्म को इको टूरिज्म कहते हैं. ओके, इट मेजरली इंक्लूड्स टूरिज्म टू नेचुरल एरियाज फॉर एनवायरमेंटल कंजर्वेशन एंड गोइंग लोकल. We will dive more into the depth of this entire, these three subtopics. But the major idea of ecotourism is when you are going out, for a to a tourist location for any tourist activities. There are certain things that we need to keep in mind, and most of those things revolve around these three subtopics that you can see on the screen. Natural areas, जो नेचर वगैरह में होते हैं, ऐसे सारे एरियाज में जाना, कॉन्जर्वेशन करना, हमारे जो प्रकृति है उसे संभालना, एंड वोकल फॉर लोकल, जो हम बहुत ज्यादा सुनते आ रहे हैं आजकल, स्पेशली आफ्टर कोविड. So that is your whole idea of ecotourism. Now, ecotourism is a very largely accepted concept, and largely to an extent that there are multiple sorts of policies and multiple sorts of regulations that are undertaken for ecotourism. Like the IUCN, जो है International Union of Conservation of Nature, has defined ecotourism, and this is an entire definition. मैंने उसको बस सब points में डाला है. So let's look at it one by one. ठीक है? It is environmentally responsible visiting of a relatively unspoiled natural area. So regular tourism, we usually just pick places that are all the hype and just पर Instagram पे reels बने हुए हैं, ये सारे places पर हम जाते हैं. But when it comes to eco tourism, हम थोड़ा सा उस aspect से shift होकर we move towards the aspect of going to a natural area जो ज्यादा nature में हो and जो थोड़ा सा undisturbed हो. But when it comes to this point of being undisturbed, it comes with a whole set of rules and regulations और जो follow करने पड़ते हैं. We will look at that too. Moving on, so we have a responsible visiting to unspoiled natural areas in order to enjoy and appreciate nature, not to disturb it, not to see a tiger and start screaming because जिंदगी में पहली बार टाइगर देखा है. No, it is to enjoy and appreciate nature without leaving anything back. Very important. And any accompanying cultural features, both past and present. So it is not just nature, it can also be culturally important places. राइट, तो ऐसा नहीं कि हर ट्रिप अभी बस जंगल में करना है एंड जंगल सफारीज प्लान करने हैं वगैरह वगैरह. Forts on all of those areas, all of these, other heritage sites, all of these are also a part of ecotourism. For that matter of fact, even your beaches and your regular places are a part of ecotourism if you do it mindfully. Moving on, that promotes conservation, right? So far we have covered responsible visiting of natural and culturally rich areas. to appreciate and enjoy them, and to promote conservation. इट इज इम्पॉर्टेंट कि सो ये सारे जो हमारे साइट्स होते हैं, है ना, योर हेरिटेज साइट्स एंड योर नेचुरल एरियाज, all of these are usually given an extreme amount of protection both by the government and by the locals and your private people जो भी उस area को manage करते हैं. And there's a lot of conservation that happens because of course you can't let a place just degrade. It needs to be conserved nicely and properly. So we need to do and plan our tourism in a manner that we are trying and promoting conservation also, creating awareness sort of a thing, or at least ensuring that our activities are not super disturbing. Okay. They need to have a low negative visitor impact. The visitor impact doesn't have to be neutral, it has to be negative. So वहां जाकर कचरा नहीं फेंकते हैं, वहां जाकर हमारी चीजें हमारे लिए कलेक्टिबल्स उठाते नहीं है, हैव अ लो नेगेटिव इम्पैक्ट, and which is providing beneficiary for the socio-economic development of the local population. Very important. ऐसा नहीं कि हम टूरिस्ट लोकेशन पर जाते हैं एंड देन वी आर लाइक ठीक है, कोई अच्छा फैंसी सा खाना मंगाते हैं कोई अच्छे फैंसी से होटल से. It is important as a part of ecotourism and as a responsibility of an eco-tourist to ensure कि हम जो लोकल कल्चर है उस पर्टिकुलर रीजन का जहाँ पर हम जा रहे हैं हमारे टूरिज्म के लिए, it's important that we try and mingle with the local people and experience the culture, the significance of that particular place, because that is one way where we will actually be able to conserve that particular thing. One of the most important parts of conservation, and this is not a bias from me, but is education. एंड एजुकेशन तभी हो सकता है जब हम एक्चुअली जाकर इंटरैक्ट करें उन लोगों से एंड ट्राई टू understand and see what it is that they do for a living, how they live. So that last point is very important for active socio-economic development of the local population. Now there is an entire, a group organization of sorts, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, UNWTO, right? So the job of UNWTO is to ensure that there is sustainable and universally accessible tourism. So UNWTO actually offers support to the tourism sector in advancing their knowledge and tourism policies. Okay? And this is not just limited to a certain, countries or different states. It is worldwide. They try to advocate responsible tourism and try to promote tourism as a driving force towards the economic growth. Again, see here the emphasis is drawn towards economic growth. So, economic growth, especially of the local populations, is a very important factor. And inclusive development and environment sustainability. Basically, the whole idea is to implement the global code of ethics in tourism, which is something that they have developed in order to ensure that tourism activities worldwide are happening in a sustainable manner, in a manner जो align हो UN के 2030 agenda for sustainable development and SDGs के लिए. So there is a whole, bunch of what do you say, ideas that they have put together, okay, and they have ensured that these ideas are helping align with the development goals, sustainable development goals that tourism contributes to. So tourism has to be done in a manner कि वो SDGs को contribute करे. And if you look at this chart, the most of the SDGs are some in some or the other smallest way contributed towards your sustainable development. Most of them are decent and economic growth because again, when you are going to a tourist location, ऐसा होता है कि we are trying to source everything locally. So it is definitely maximum impact is happening at the goal number 8, that is decent and economic growth. Next is industry, innovation and infrastructure because all of these developments are important. Goal number 11, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, partnership to achieve the goals. And of course, if you're doing all of these, you will definitely achieve climate action and all of the other goals. So these are the top goals as per a survey in 2023 that tourism as a sector contributes to. And they have this entire thing called tourism for SDGs, where the whole idea of UNWTO, like I have mentioned, is to ensure that tourism is done in a manner that it aligns with the SDGs. And G20 in India has been a part of this. When the G20 summit in India has happened, there was an entire discussion about tourism that happened, for which I have also developed many a plans. And in that, they have developed a roadmap for tourism in India. So, some of the sustainable development goals that target tourism and sustainable development, thus target 8.9 of goal number 8, that says that by 2030 devise and implement policies to promote sustainable tourism. So policies ban rahe हैं for sustainable tourism, and there is a target that helps create jobs especially for the local culture, local people and the local communities. Then the next major SDG जो cover हो रहा है is number 12, responsible consumption and production में से 12A is formulated as develop and implement tools to monitor sustainable development impacts and sustainable tourism that creates jobs and promotes local culture, right? So there is so much of emphasis when it comes to tourism, to promote your local, and your advocating for all of the cultural aspects of it, right? Next we have is goal number 14, that is 14.7, life below water by 2030, increase the economic benefits of small island developing states. There are different countries around the world, okay, जिसमें there are the ones that are smaller countries that are sort of like islands, and there is major emphasis जो discuss हो रहा है to sort of bring them into light and help them develop a better tourism plan, right? Because they're already a small country and it is important to help develop these things. Okay, from the sustainable use of marine resources through sustainable management of fisheries and aquaculture, right? So these are a few targets and few SDGs that are kept into consideration when talking about sustainable tourism on a global level. Now when it comes to that, बहुत सारे ऐसे principles है, major important aspects, ठीक है, of ecotourism that we really need to keep in mind, at least at the back of our head, especially for people who are developing tourism, not so much for tourists, but also for tourists, but more for the people who are developing tourism. So ecotourism is about uniting conservation, right? And communities and sustainable travel. All of these things can come together, and only then can we actually attain ecotourism. तो इसका क्या मतलब होता है? That those who implement, participate in and market ecotourism activities should adopt a few of these principles. And they are very basic. So what does the first one say? Minimize physical, social behavior and psychological impact on both the location as well as the people, right? So it is important to find the right balance when we are doing a tour, when we are conducting tourism activities in a certain area, कि वहां पे उस एनवायरनमेंट पे भी इम्पैक्ट नहीं हो. अगर वैसा कुछ हो रहा है, इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट टू रेगुलेट द अमाउंट ऑफ पीपल दैट आर विजिटिंग दैट पर्टिकुलर प्लेस, क्योंकि अदरवाइज इफ यू कॉन्स्टेंटली हैव अ inflow of tourists more than the holding capacity of that location, that's when your degradation will start. It will become difficult to sustainably manage that location, cleanliness wise, food wise. अगर locally बात कर रहे हैं तो it's not so easy to keep sourcing food, है ना, from the local people. How much can you ask them to make all of these things that they are providing as a part of their culture? All of that is also acquired from nature. So important to regulate the kind of tourism and the location. Build environmental and cultural awareness and respect, especially among the tourists. So if you are someone who is managing a tourist location, it is also important to provide activities that can actually help people connect to the culture there. Otherwise, अगर लोगों को access नहीं है, how are they ever going to be able to, understand what is happening in that particular location, right? Then provide positive experience for both the visitors and the hosts. Again, it comes to balancing everything out in a manner that is viable for the particular location. Provide direct financial benefits for conservation, because if it is a tourism site, it has to be managed and there has to be conservation, especially if it is natural site. So it is important to provide benefits for the conservation, to deliver memorable experiences to the visitors, to help raise sensitivity, okay, for countries' political, environmental, and social climates. Important ये भी होता है कि the people who are visiting are able to connect to that location. You know, if we are not giving them that kind of an experience, even as tourists, like I'm not trying to push the entire blame कि you know जो host है जो particular location जा रहे हैं उन्होंने ही सब करना है. Even as tourists, अगर किसी location पे जा रहे हैं वहाँ पे कुछ activities conduct हो रहे हैं, if we as tourists are least interested to even go and explore, there will never be a kind of conservation. एक हाथ से ताली नहीं बज सकती. We as tourists also will have to ensure that we are trying to connect with what is available in order to understand the local and cultural heritage of that particular location. Then the sixth point says design, construct, and operate low impact facilities. Again, as much as possible, avoid maybe vehicles, let's say, which use fossil fuels. To try going solar or battery operated vehicles, something of that sort that can have low impact. Recognize the rights and spiritual benefits of the indigenous people. This comes very much into the picture when we are going to culturally and spiritually sensitive locations where there are a lot of indigenous people involved, the tribal people especially that are involved, okay, in the community work, and work in partnership with them to create empowerment. Because these indigenous people and these local and tribal people are actually the ones who have been there generation after generation, जो उस particular location को manage करते हैं. And this is especially true when it comes to forests and all of these locations. कि ये सारे लोकेशन पे जो ट्राइबल्स है वहाँ के आदिवासी वही है जो इतने सारे सालों से उस जगह को मेंटेन करते आए हैं. एंड इफ यू कीप हियरिंग अबाउट द न्यूज, इट्स ऑलवेज अ थिंग दैट यू हियर कि फॉरेस्ट डिपार्टमेंट एंड इंडिजिनियस पीपल के बीच में देयर इज दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ अ कांस्टेंट कॉन्फ्लिक्ट दैट इज गोइंग ऑन, बिकॉज there's a certain agenda that the educated come with, and there is a certain way of following things that the indigenous people do, and there is always a conflict between that. And there is something that we really need to work upon. We need to ensure, especially if we are visiting forest locations, that somehow we try and get into an activity where we can interact with these indigenous people and understand the history of that natural location, how they have survived these things, what they do, and how they have managed, and how many generations, and what is it that they eat, what is it that they do as recreation. These are small things, and they are very important when it comes to becoming a sustainable tourist and conducting ecotourism as well. And finally, generate financial benefits for both local people as well as the private industry, because at the end of the day, all of us need money. But it is more important to understand that this money needs to go to the people who are actually from there and can actually help, take care of that particular location. Right? Like I recently had a visit in the Konkan side, and there was some kind of a development that was going to be done in that particular location, but it did not happen. Why? Because it was the local people that stood against that kind of development, because they knew how sensitive that particular zone is and how development, okay, would sort of impact the natural beauty and the natural area of that particular location. So it is important that these local people are given the recognition and the credit that they deserve, because they have been taking care of most of these touristy places that we so love visiting and feel so connected and refreshed to जब हम जाते हैं बाहर. Now, India as a country, we are very well aware, is very rich with all of these beautiful locations. Like our country itself, we can get all sorts of habitats that we require. Coast hai, mountains है, snow है, mangroves है, forest है, desert है, hot deserts है, cold deserts है. We have everything in our own country. And I very strongly believe the first step towards ecotourism is at least ensure that you are visiting your own country before you visit outside, because, well, that is very local, and That will, of course, reduce your carbon footprint also. So, India's rich natural ecotourism resources, India has a significant geographic advance. Nearly 70% of the Himalayas, 7,000 kilometers of coastline. One out of three countries in the world which has both hot and cold desert. It ranks 10th in total area of forest cover and 6th in terms of recognized UNESCO natural heritage sites. All of these in our own country itself, and there is so much we can explore and take towards a step for ecotourism in our own country. There have been several efforts that have been put together by the government of India also. Like I mentioned, there was this entire G20 summit. Now the government of India has also put together a bunch of things, right, that can help with ecotourism. All right. And the government has developed an entire strategy, the national strategy for ecotourism, which was developed in the year 2022, which lists out a number of interventions that the government will be probing into in order to ensure that India also as a country can develop ecotourism. Okay? So there is this ecotourism guideline by MOEF, that is Ministry of Forest, Environment and Climate Change, has released the ecotourism guidelines in and around protected areas. Okay? And these guidelines that are created have taken into consideration the Tiger Task Force, the Wildlife Protection Act, as well as the Forest Rights Act. In Sarong Ko, all of the provisions that are mentioned in these three have been taken into consideration, and an entire set of guidelines have been created for the ecotourism in India. Apart from that, there is also a national strategy on sustainable tourism that has been created by the government. So the Ministry of Tourism formulated a national strategy, okay, which emphasizes on again environment, economic, and socio-cultural sustainability. So it is covering all three pillars of sustainable development in this strategy. It aims to integrate sustainability into the tourism sector by drawing focus on promoting ecotourism and adventure tourism. And there is also the national strategy for rural tourism. That is, they have notified on the national strategy of rural tourism, keeping in view that ecotourism and adventure tourism are largely away from cities. है ना? We usually do not go to cities, natural places, and it is relevant for the promotion of ecotourism and adventure tourism in the country within these rural areas. And all of these three things together, the guidelines, the national strategy for sustainable tourism and for rural tourism, these together form the national strategy for ecotourism. There are many things that the government has taken into consideration while drawing this strategy. They have ensured that there is information, education, and communication that is being built both among the hosts and the tourists. Right, there have been resources that are built at the national level as well as at state levels also. There have been many task forces that have been formed at the state level ताकि हर state में equal and अच्छे से development हो. There has been a lot of capacity building and skill building, especially for the local people. There have been centers there in the strategy. There are being centers set up for training of tour guides, for digitization of the whole thing. They have mostly drawn emphasis towards the need for constantly developing these kind of activities. There has also been equal amount of importance given to strengthening private sector as well, for giving them a proper framework to work, for ensuring that the local people, the homestays जो भी provide होते हैं उन सारों के लिए भी development हो. There have been campaigns drawn for responsible travelers, for people like you and me who travel to these locations. So इन सारी चीजों को मिलाकर एक बहुत ब्रॉड स्ट्रैटेजी बनाया हुआ है ताकि इको टूरिज्म प्रमोट हो सके. एंड when it comes to this, it is important now for us as travelers to understand that how much ever the government and the private sector and the local people and all of these tourist destinations try and create these wonderful strategies, until we do not take the first step towards trying and promoting ecotourism and doing eco-friendly activities during our visits, none of this is actually going to make any sense. So how can tourists like you and me adopt ecotourism? Very simple, basic things. No massive bombardment of ये मत करो, यहाँ मत जाओ, वहाँ मत जाओ. Don't go to fancy locations. Go only to rural, tribal places. Nothing of that sort. It's very simple, everyday things. Things like carry reusable water bottle, not just reusable water bottle, but if you know that you are staying somewhere and then going out into, let's say, a safari, and you are going into the remote location of a forest, don't carry anything that you need to throw away. Or if you are, make sure you're keeping it back into your bag instead of disposing it off into the forest, right? Pack snacks in an eco-conscious manner, such as in steel, bioplastic, or bamboo, right? Never dispose wrappers or napkins or waste on your trails. Resist any urge to disturb wildlife, because again, I totally understand the urge when we see an animal, we want to touch it and feed it and all of those things. But वो अच्छा नहीं है. We don't need to. Wild animals जो है उन्हें इंसानों वाले खाने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. उनका उनका डाइट अलग होता है, हमारा अलग होता है. So we need to resist the urge to try and disturb wildlife. We need to be as quiet and give the animals as much space as possible. It's important to eat fresh, locally sourced meals, because that's how we can connect to the culture of that particular location. Go to a scenic place instead of just trying to, be within our rooms. And again, I do understand जब holidays के लिए जाते हैं, there is that teensy bit of tendency कि अरे यार room में बैठते हैं, chill करते हैं. But until you don't go out there and actually explore, you will not learn. Then participate in sustainable tourism activities. Trust me, there are a lot of activities that will be possible if you go just beyond a little bit of a comfort zone and find out क्या हो सकता है. Maybe if you are going to a beach location, a coastal location, there might be a cleanup activity जो हो रहा है वहाँ पे, या कोई plantation activity हो रहा है, या there are some educational sessions that are being conducted by the forest department or your tour hosts to learn and understand about that place. Or there are some nice museums and stuff like that that are around. Go there, learn about those things, interact with the locals, visit historic buildings that tell a story and are an important part of the place's history, because then will we be able to connect better with that place. Take a walk or a bike tour to visit historic neighborhoods, view street art, something as basic as that. We don't need to do something very fancy. Visit monuments and statues of significance. Shop local, purchase souvenirs from local people, not fancy stuff, something that is local from that particular place. Join a community or a group of volunteers for a local event to build a sense of connection between you and the community you are visiting. So, the whole idea again of ecotourism is to not go out of your way and try to look for a location that is, more eco or more nature. Okay, of course, please do that, but do not again go out of your way to do that. In some way or the other, wherever we are visiting, we can be conscious and mindful of the things that we do. And if we can manage to do that much, I think we can make any and every activity and every trip an eco trip for us. And keeping these small things in mind, it is important that the next time you go out on a trip, try and see how you can make your trip eco-friendly in a manner that it is environmentally viable and it helps the local communities and also contributes to the economy of that location. And with this, I conclude my session. Thank you so much, and I hope this has helped you be more mindful, and hope you plan your next trip in a manner that it is nice and sustainable for everyone. Thank you so much, and see you next Saturday.